October is upon us, and another Talking Tuesday is here on the Podcast Daily as well. That is Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. It's ramping up, folks. Another notch up in competition as Ohio State gets set to host Iowa. They've already got one Big Ten game in the bag and another win as they get ready and build momentum in here to the meaty part of the schedule with the Hawkeyes coming in Oregon on deck after that. We will be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center shortly to talk to Ryan Day and Will Howard, and for the second week in a row, Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, so that Chip Kelly can preview the Oregon game in a week. So we will get offense, defense, and quarterback. And now we get to find out what Bill Landis is going to ask them on a Talkin' Tuesday. What could be better than that?
Nothing could be better than that. I'm very thankful to have, what did Urban used to call them, real ones, right? Like, this is a real one.
It's a real one.
This is a real one in my mind. Is it a real one in your mind? Like, sometimes you talk about like games that perhaps on paper might look good and then get pumped up sort of needlessly. Like, this actually feels like a real one to me.
I don't want to pat myself on the back. I've been saying that Iowa's physicality, their defense, I wasn't anticipating their running game being as prolific as it has been through the first month of the season. No, they're not the most talented team on Ohio State's schedule, but I really think that they are well coached. They're tough. They always do some stuff with that defensive scheme that creates havoc and confusion. Even really good Ohio State teams sometimes need a bit of time to adjust. Sometimes they have to give up a defensive touchdown before that happens against Iowa. So like, I did think all along that it wasn't just fast forward to Oregon. Like, Michigan State was a little bit better than I thought. I did anticipate Iowa being a physical challenge, and then there's Oregon. That's part of the gradual incline here. Like, if you don't show up ready to play against Iowa, you might regret it.
I think you're right. And like, I get, I think as we record this, it's a 20.5 point spread or something like that. It's about 3 touchdowns. So like, everyone's in the world is expecting Ohio State to win this game. And like, I think Ohio State's going to win it too. But I think Iowa is all the things you said it is, but also arrives on the schedule at an interesting time, particularly for Ohio State's defense, that I know there's been a ton of conversation about it. And some consternation probably is a more correct word for it. And I do think some of it is warranted, because I think facets of this defense are a little like, is this really where it needs to be? Iowa will tell us, right, whether or not it is. Like, it's not a team that's going to come out and throw it all over the stadium on Ohio State. It is, while a modestly improved passing offense, a rather bad passing offense. This is a team that wants to run the ball and wants to test how well you tackle and wants to try to put your linebackers, I think, in conflict with the way that it goes about playing offense, which I think is a good place to start the Talkin' Tuesday conversation. At least that's kind of what's front of mind for me, is a couple of things relative to the linebackers for Jim Knowles, and I suppose Ryan Day as well, which is like a general assessment of the position. Is it where you thought it'd be coming into the year? I would imagine the personnel at this point and how it's sort of stacking up is different, because clearly CJ Hicks has fallen down that pecking order and Arvell Reese has risen up that pecking order. So that's one thing that's different. But I have found the play to be a bit lackluster at times. Maybe it would be a nice way to say it. And especially early on against Michigan State, it really felt like the Spartans showed up thinking they could take advantage of Ohio State's linebackers, and did for a couple of drives, and then it stopped. Iowa will do the same thing, or attempt to do the same thing. Whether or not it will be as effective, I don't know. So I'm just left, wondering like where exactly that position is, like more specifically for Jim Knowles. Whether or not he feels like it's a strength, whether or not he feels like he is putting that position in the best situations to be successful, whether he likes the results he's gotten thus far by playing a lot more 4-3, frankly, than I thought Ohio State was going to play this year. So there's a lot there, I think, to kind of chew on with Jim Knowles. And I think the metrics for Ohio State's defense are awesome. Like, they're like top 10 in everything and the number 1 scoring defense, I think, in the country. It's not like this has been a bad defense, but you just sort of take the momentary glimpses of, well, that was an interesting drive. I wonder how that team managed to move the ball there. And then try to extrapolate it a little more now that it is playing, I think, probably the most competent offense that it has played thus far. I won't even stop short of calling Iowa a good offense, but clearly it has a pretty good rushing attack and one of the better running backs in the country. And I think this is a game where we'll learn like whether or not the concerns about the front seven probably generally are warranted or if they're not.
I wonder, and I don't know if Jim Knowles would reveal this information or not, if the prevalence of 4-3 personnel groupings against Michigan State was to prepare to use it extensively against Iowa, because to me, it didn't feel like a necessity against Michigan State. Even when they went 12 personnel, were they worried that Michigan State was going to gash them on the ground? I don't know why. And I think you anticipate that that's going to be more necessary against Iowa, although I would still, in the back of my mind, push back on that slightly because of what it means for the snap count for Jordan Hancock. And I just frankly don't believe that this team is its best version of itself defensively when Jordan Hancock is on the sideline. He is more than up to the challenge, and I think in some instances prefers to play against the run rather than in coverage with his physicality. And I think it was 19 snaps against Michigan State. To me, personally, that doesn't feel like enough. So does Jim Knowles agree with that? Is there something else they would do differently to defend? Is this just a game where Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles have to play extensively along with Cody Simon because of the way I was going to run the football? What does that mean? I don't know the answer. I'm curious what Jim Knowles thinks about that as they prepare for this game. It goes into exactly what you're talking about with the assessment. And maybe Ohio State needed to use Michigan State as an added assessment for where Sonny Styles might be playing in his transition from safety to linebacker. There have been some snaps for him. I think we skip past this. Like with Sonny's physicality and athleticism, it's like, oh, he's smart. He knows what he's going to do. He's going to be really good for Ohio State. I think there have been times where he hasn't played up to starting full-time or full potential. I don't know the right word to put it there, I guess, but like there have been times that he hasn't been perfect, and there can be other explanations for that with, the way the defensive line has played in the last couple of weeks, but it's all wrapped up into this interesting thing, which is you're saying, let's assess the linebackers, and like there are 55 offshoots of what that means for not just them, but Jordan Hancock and Tyleik Williams returning and all these other things. It's a fascinating time to be looking at Ohio State's defense, which is still the best in America.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's still at the end of the day, like still playing pretty well. I understand the frustrations of like slowness to adapt at times, or letting the offenses kind of dictate terms. Why isn't Ohio State the one dictating terms? I think part of that could be like the ramp up thing that we've talked about. I don't know. Maybe that's giving Jim Knowles too much credit. I think we're in a place with Sonny where it's worth asking, like, why is he the one that plays 42 snaps? I think is what it was against Michigan State, when I think he is probably, just in terms of quality of play right now, their third best linebacker behind Cody Simon and Arvell Reese. And it does feel like they still have kid gloves on with Arvell. Like, unless I'm wrong, I haven't charted it, all of it. I've charted some of it, and I'm going mostly off memory. Like, I think Arvell is really only playing when he's out there with the ones anyway, when he's out there with two other linebackers. So do they trust Arvell Reese in his second year and his first year playing linebacker to be the Mike with Cody Simon at the will in a way that doesn't have Sonny Styles out there all the time, as Sonny is like still very clearly figuring some stuff out. And I think it felt like he was the guy that Michigan State was like, we can attack him. It like early in the year was like Akron was like, we can attack CJ Hicks. And then now it's, we can attack Sonny Styles. And like offenses are always going to find the stress points, right? And I don't think there's a defense in existence that doesn't have a stress point. So Ohio State will do things, I think, to mask that. And I do think Sonny Styles will get better. But in the meantime, like maybe you don't have to put so much pressure on him by playing him as much as they are if you think Arvell Reese is ready. And it feels to me like they believe that, the way they've talked about Arvell. So that's one of those offshoots. It's just like the deployment of personnel relative to the three linebackers who are going to play. But then it's also Jordan Hancock. Like I would love to hear like a good explanation for why Ohio State's defense is better when Jordan Hancock is not on the field, right? So like I don't know what it is. It'd be one thing if he was a defensive back who doesn't like to mix it up against the run, but we have a lot of data that tells us that he does, and is in fact, I think, better at it than probably every linebacker other than Cody Simon that they would put out there. So why is it just an automatic they go 2 tight ends, we go 3 linebackers thing? It just seems like a sort of like odd impulsive thing for Jim Knowles to do when that's not really who he is sort of at his heart as a defensive coordinator. And it's not like the linebacker position is overflowing with talent where you're just like, man, we got to get these guys on the field. Like the strength of the defense is still the secondary. And to take away from that while adding someone from a position group that is a lesser position group, even if you think the linebackers have a lot of promise, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And it's not like been their undoing, right? They're 4-0 and the defense, like we said, is still playing well. It's just a thing that I know I worry about as I'm watching games sometimes. Like this doesn't look very good or sound, and I'm a little nervous about what might happen when Ohio State encounters an offense that's like able to exploit that for more than a drive or two.
Yeah, and I do think that Iowa's offensive approach would lend itself to that, and giving Ohio State a true test. I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but I think of them as a knockoff version of Michigan from the previous couple years. Lesser personnel, and they don't have Connor Stallions. So those are the two things that limit them from.
They do have Cade McNamara, though.
Well, again, that's the lesser version.
Yeah, right.
But because I think that they're going to hang their hat on being physical, a good offensive line, not as good as what Michigan had the last couple of years, good running game, probably not to the same level as Blake Corum, although maybe close, maybe comparable at that spot. And then trying to set up play action and use tight ends, which Michigan did with great success in the last couple of years and often got the linebackers manipulated and out of position and attacked the middle of the field. Michigan State did some of that and exploited that in the first half. Ohio State adjusted, but I wonder if the things that Jim Knowles has talked about over the last couple of years, and even during the off week, during improvement week, saying, well, I'm trying to project this forward and predict where teams are going to attack, still feels like mostly the Michigan blueprint would be what teams want to use. And I'm not sure that anyone is as equipped to do that on Ohio until maybe Penn State as Iowa is right now.
I think that's right. It is in a lot of ways like, yeah, a fairly similar offensive identity. And the tight ends for Iowa are good. Like Luke, we know how good Luke Lachey is.
Yep.
Luke Lachey should be playing at Ohio State, but he's not.
Also
and then
true.
and then I think Addison Estringa is the other one who's like a pretty good player as well. So those are guys that'll make you pay in coverage as a linebacker if you're not sound there. That honestly might be the thing that worries me more for this game, more than Ohio State like showing up and getting pushed off the line of scrimmage, is what those 2 tight ends might be able to do in the pass game against linebackers, because that's where Michigan State I thought really kind of made a little bit of a dent. Jordan Hancock helped clean one of them up by stripping that ball away from Jack Villing, but that is the matchup that concerns me. And I know Jim Knowles said last week when we talked to him that he felt like the coverage was improving for the linebackers, and if that was the case, then I think last week probably would have been a step back. So maybe we can ask him about that too, because I don't think he'll set it up so that like Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom are covering the tight ends. I think he wants those guys in the box, like making tackles and not preoccupied with coverage responsibilities against Iowa. So maybe it will fall to the linebackers that have to play better. But again, like another way to lessen the concern about your coverage of tight ends, it feels like it could just be to play Jordan Hancock, right? So like he can, so I don't know. I think the reliance on 4-3 that we saw last week, and even like what's felt like a little bit of a build up to it from the week before against Marshall, probably tells us that we're going to see a lot of 4-3 against Iowa. I just don't think the 4-3s look great. And maybe that's because they don't major in it, so they have to get game reps in it. And while they're getting game reps in it, it's not going to look all that great, but perhaps they have enough now that when they unveil it against Iowa, it'll look a little better. But I do kind of think whether or not this is a game comes down to how well Ohio State's linebackers play on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's supposed to be one of the real perks of playing Sonny Styles at linebacker, is that he can cover tight ends. I mean, this is a key week, I think, for him. And if he's not a finished product after 4 games at linebacker, I don't think that should be cause for alarm or concern or panic. But they're going to need him to play really well. The amount of snaps that he's been playing, if that continues against Iowa and Oregon, he's going to be the one I think that has to take that challenge and meet the moment in these next 2 weeks to keep Ohio State's defense on track. But offensively, feels like things are just fine for Chip Kelly and Ryan Day and Will Howard.
Yeah, I think so. I don't really have much in the way of questions with the offense. I have a personnel question at right guard, I guess, because I thought Austin Saravel played pretty well against Michigan State and perhaps played slightly better than Tegra. I thought they were both fine, like both good, but I'm going to wonder until they decide to announce otherwise or just make a decision, like how long they're going to keep playing both those guys there. And perhaps Michigan State's defense is pretty good, actually. So that they did it there maybe suggests that they're comfortable doing it against anyone as long as the results aren't drastically different from one guy to the next. But I do wonder if the Michigan State performances open the door perhaps a little more for a switch there eventually. Like, I don't know about you. I don't think I'd be shocked if Austin Saravel started against Iowa. And maybe that's me like taking that and running with it a little too much. But I thought the play, well, again, good from both, was better enough from Austin Saravel that maybe a switch there could be made. And perhaps they still play both, but maybe the guy who takes the first series is different. So that's probably worth asking Ryan Day about, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we might be on the precipice of that change. The right side of the offensive line as a whole did not play as well, or at least not as well as the left did, I think, against Michigan State. And I want to make this point that may not be a deficiency on Ohio State's side. I think Michigan State's front was really good, and they sent a ton of different blitzes and pressure packages that I don't think Ohio State had faced through 4 games. So I thought they did adjust and played certainly well enough with both play calling and execution and everything else to do what they needed to do. And if they had tried to score at all or played the starters in the fourth quarter, we may not be having this conversation at all. It may not be necessary anyway, but I do think that it is possible to think that a switch might be coming at right guard. And usual caveat, insert that right here, PFF grades are not flawless. They're not perfect. Sometimes they can be informational and point you in the right direction. Austin Saravel, as a run blocker, has graded out better, according to that metric, than Tegra Shabola in 3 of the 4 games so far this year. And I think if that's the key thing for Ohio State, which it certainly seems like it is, that it's building around the run game and then complementing that with play action and RPO stuff, maybe Austin Saravel right now does give them a little bit more. And that's a relatively surprising development thinking back to the start of August. But, I could see both continuing to play. Ryan Day seems to really like the idea of that platoon and bringing them both along at a slightly slower pace and giving them iPad time and tablet time on the sideline, a chance to regroup and refresh and all those things. That may be the way that it continues to go. But I think every time Austin Saravel gets in, whether that's, the third or fourth drive, whatever it is of these games the last couple of weeks, both times Ohio State immediately pops a run. First, it was Quinshon's 86-yard touchdown 2 weeks ago, and then it was whatever it was, 15, 20 yards around the left side at Michigan State. And coincidence, small sample size, both. But there just seems to be something when Austin Saravel goes in that seems to help the run game.
He's a spark plug, that guy. He just really ignites.
Well, six man, just bring him on.
That's right. I don't think Tegra has not been a liability at all. Like I think he's played quite well in his first couple of starts at Ohio State and will continue, even if the thing we're talking about happens, like as a guy who will be very much in the mix for playing time moving forward. I do think you probably have to pick one at some point. And this is a very good defensive front that Ohio State's about to face. Like the defensive line is stout and gets after it. The linebackers are awesome. Like that offensive line is going to get tested. For even though I think Michigan State does have a good front seven, this is, I think, significantly better. So this will be like a real test of where exactly this offensive line is. I thought it answered the challenge fine against Michigan State, but this is another step up. I actually think it's possible that we look back at the end of the year and think maybe this was perhaps the second best defensive line that Ohio State sees in a regular season behind Michigan. perhaps like even better than a Penn State. So we'll see. But I think how that group plays is will I guess like dictate things on that side of the ball. Iowa's very stingy against the run. I want to ask Ryan Day a little bit about the run game and kind of how it's evolved and how he feels about that, how he feels about like the ideas that they've sort of landed on as their bread and butter, or even if the idea that there maybe isn't a bread and butter play, perhaps is like its strength, because it felt like early on maybe they were going to be a pretty heavy inside zone team, and like they still run it, but they're mixing in a bunch of counter. They're just a nice run game balance, and I think alternative to just having that like one kind of run play that you hang your hat on and like run different variations of it, which is not dissimilar from what Iowa does offensively. Ohio State's run game calling card is that like it doesn't have one. It can throw a bunch of different things at you. Chip Kelly is a little bit of a madman with his run game design, as we saw when Emeka Egbuka was the lead blocker on a counterplay last week and flattened the linebacker. So it's not. I don't approach this game with like a concern about Ohio State's ability to run the ball, because they've run it really well through the first 4 games of the season. But like everything else in this game, this is just like a stress test of like what's real for Ohio State and what maybe still needs more work than we realize. So that'll definitely be the case for the rushing attack. But I'm mostly just excited to see it like on display against this defense. But I would also like to pick Ryan Day's brain a little bit on how they arrived at some of the ideas that seem to be working for them, and the creativity within the run game, which has been really cool to see through the first couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly not done. I mean, they're you throw in a unexpected end around to Jeremiah Smith and you immediately score a touchdown on it. Like I keep saying it, I guess, on Talking Tuesday, and it's like it'll be great the next week when we do talk to Chip Kelly, but like, where would he estimate that they are with the offense? You know, Zach Boren asked me that on Monday on the daily on Boren Blitz, and I'm like, I don't know, 25%. That's still those couple plays that we saw in training camp that I kept talking about throughout all August. They still haven't run that. And that makes me think that like, that madman is still going to have things. And that's what I'm excited to see what that looks like against Iowa, because I really believe that this is a meaningful test for where Ohio State's offense is. And not in terms of like, are they going to score points? Because if they decided to just throw it deep to Jeremiah and Emeka all game, I think they would score. This is not the best version of the Iowa secondary that we've ever seen, although they're going to be well coached and in position most likely, but they're not going to be able to just run step for step with JJ or Emeka or Carnell Tate. So if we're looking for this and trying to analyze, did they correct or improve some of the short yardage or consistency with the rushing attack that was missing in the previous couple of years in the biggest games? Again, focusing primarily on Michigan, which, sorry to keep calling you a knockoff Michigan, Iowa, but that's how I view you, which I mean as a compliment, even if it sounds like an insult. I think we'll find that out on Saturday.
Yeah, they're a knockoff Michigan, but they get bonus points for not cheating. So that's where the compliment comes in.
Yeah, that's right. You never hired Connor Stallions, and good for you. If you lose, you do it with honor.
That's right.
A true Iowa man plays with integrity. And I've always said that. It's Talking Tuesday. We're going to have some fun. We're going to be in the Woody. We're going to have snap judgments. We're going to maybe have one Big Ten game to maybe have a stonk report on Wednesday. We'll keep that rolling we'll think about that now. Kings of the North, Kings of Columbus rolling along. We'll have Buckeye Q with Zach Boren this week. And on Thursday night, Bryant Heating and Cooling Systems weekend kickoff. We'll be back for another big Ohio State home game. We'll be at the Fairway Columbus on Thursday night at 7. Mike Bennett and Zach Boren will be there. It'll be a really fun show. I can't promise it'll be great, but we're going to try. It'll be fun no matter what. This, though, was Talking Tuesday on the Podcast Daily. Going to be in there to listen to Bill Landis' questions. We'll have a stream of the press conference up on the podcast as well. But thanks for joining us now. He's Bill. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.